Johnny pulled out his handkerchief and wiped his eyes, not bothering to hide his emotion. I've been doing this show for almost 20 years, and I've had the privilege of interviewing some of the most talented people in the world. But I don't think I've ever met anyone braver or more generous than Timothy Hudson. The response to Timothy's appearance on The Tonight Show was immediate and overwhelming. By the time the show ended, the NBC switchboard had received over 10,000 calls. People wanted to know how they could help Timothy and other children like him. Within 24 hours, donations to Children's Hospital Los Angeles had exceeded $50,000. Within a week, that number had grown to over $300,000. People sent letters, toys, and gifts addressed to Timothy Hudson at the hospital, creating a mountain of support that required extra staff just to manage. But more than the money or gifts, people sent something even more valuable: love. Thousands of people wrote to Timothy telling him how brave he was, how his joke had made them laugh, and how his courage had inspired them. Timothy Hudson lived for 3 more weeks after his appearance on The Tonight Show. During that time, he received visitors from across the country, comedians who came to tell him jokes, actors who came to meet their young fan, and ordinary people who simply wanted to thank him for reminding them what courage looked like. Johnny Carson visited Timothy twice during those final weeks, bringing jokes and stories and simply sitting with him and his family. On one visit, Timothy gave Johnny a drawing he'd made, a picture of the two of them on the Tonight Show stage with the words, "Thank you for making my dream come true," written at the bottom. Johnny kept that drawing in his office at NBC for the rest of his career and later moved it to his home, where it remained until his own death in TUA. Son 5. When Timothy Hudson passed away on April 18, 1981, 3 weeks after his Tonight Show appearance, his funeral was attended by hundreds of people, many of whom had never met him, but had been touched by his courage and joy. True to his word, Johnny Carson established the Timothy Hudson Fund, which provided entertainment, toys, and comfort items to children in hospitals across the country. The fund started with Johnny's own substantial donation and grew through contributions from viewers who had been moved by Timothy's story. Over the following decades, the Timothy Hudson Fund helped millions of sick children find moments of joy during their most difficult times. The fund provided televisions, video games, books, art supplies, and visits from entertainers to children's hospitals nationwide. In 2006, a year after Johnny Carson's death, his estate donated Timothy's drawing to the Smithsonian Institution as part of a collection representing significant moments in television history. Alongside the drawing was the original letter Timothy had sent to The Tonight Show Museum. Curators noted that more visitors stopped to read Timothy's letter and see his drawing than almost any other exhibit in the television collection. Parents brought their children to see it, explaining that sometimes the smallest voices can have the biggest impact. Timothy Hudson's appearance on The Tonight Show became a watershed moment in how Americans thought about childhood, illness, and how media could be used to support sick children. The concept of providing entertainment and joy to hospitalized children, which seems obvious now, was relatively new. In 1981, children's hospitals across the country began implementing programs inspired by Timothy's story, ensuring that young patients had access to entertainment, play, and moments of normalcy during their treatment. The child life profession, which focuses on helping children cope with healthcare experiences, credits Timothy's Tonight Show moment as a turning point in public understanding of the importance of play and joy in pediatric healthcare. In a 1989 interview, Johnny Carson was asked about the most memorable moment of his Tonight Show career. Without hesitation, he mentioned Timothy Hudson. "I've interviewed presidents and movie stars and some of the most talented people in the world," Johnny said. "But an 8-year-old boy with a knock-knock joke taught me more about courage and generosity than all of them combined." Timothy was dying, and instead of focusing on himself, he wanted to make other people laugh. That's the definition of grace. When the interviewer asked if Johnny had any regrets about that night, Johnny shook his head. "My only regret is that I didn't get to know him longer. But I'm grateful that I got to be part of his story, even if only for those few minutes." Today, when people talk about The Tonight Show's most important moments, Timothy Hudson's letter is always mentioned. It represents a time when television stopped being just entertainment and became a bridge between a dying child's wish and 20 million hearts. The knock-knock joke Timothy told that night has been repeated millions of times since then, often with the story of the brave 8-year-old boy who just wanted to make people laugh. And every time someone tells that joke and shares Timothy's story, he lives on, not as a sick child, but as a comedian who understood that laughter is one of the greatest gifts we can give each other. Johnny Carson stopped the Tonight Show that night, not because something went wrong, but because something incredibly right was happening. A child needed to be heard, and Johnny made sure the whole country was listening. If this incredible story of courage and compassion moved you, make sure to subscribe for more true stories about the moments when television reminded us of our shared humanity. Share this video with someone who needs to know that even the smallest voices can create the biggest impact. And remember that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply ask for what we need. March 27, 1981. Johnny Carson was in the middle of his monologue when a producer handed him an envelope marked urgent. Inside was a letter from a dying child that would stop the show and create the most heartbreaking moment in television history. The Tonight Show was running smoothly that Friday evening. Johnny Carson was delivering his opening monologue about President Reagan's recent economic speech, and the studio audience was responding with all the laughter and energy that made the show America's favorite late-night program. It was supposed to be just another successful episode in Johnny's nearly 2-decade run as host. But 7 minutes into his monologue, something unprecedented happened. Fred Dordova, the show's director, walked onto the stage during the live broadcast, something he had never done in all his years producing the show. In his hand was a white envelope with "Urgent for Johnny Carson" written across it in a child's handwriting. Johnny stopped mid-sentence immediately, sensing that something important was happening. The studio audience fell silent, confused by the unexpected interruption. "Johnny," Fred said quietly, though his voice carried through the microphone. "This just arrived at the studio gate. Security thought you should see it immediately." Johnny took the envelope, and as he read the address, his expression changed. The return address simply said, "Timothy Hudson, age 8, Children's Hospital, Los Angeles." "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, turning to the audience and the cameras, "I apologize for the interruption, but something just arrived that I think might be important. Do you mind if I take a moment to read this?" The audience murmured their agreement, and Johnny carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in the unsteady handwriting of a young child, with some words clearly helped by an adult, but the message unmistakably authentic. Johnny began reading silently, but as he progressed through the letter, his hand started to tremble slightly. The studio audience watched as Johnny Carson, the man who could handle any situation with perfect composure, struggled to maintain his professional demeanor. "I need to read this out loud," Johnny finally said, his voice already thick with emotion.